There was this cool sort of quasi-definitive paper that came out in Nature about Gigantopithecus.
What is that? Beyond a tongue twister.
It's a group of huge apes. And this is about the biggest guy. They did a pretty comprehensive survey and have a much clearer...
Sasquatch.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Sasquatch, essentially, yeah. They have a much better idea of when this animal actually went extinct.
Oh,
and why.
And real quick, Nelf says, is quasi the same thing as squishy? The way you say it.
In what context? I wasn't even paying attention to what I was saying.
I don't even tell us what they found in the paper after. This was like background. Okay.
I'll probably jump in. I mean, I gave you the highlights. They have a better idea, a much more narrow view or a narrow window of when the animal went extinct and why it went extinct.
And why is that good?
Why?
Like how does that help? Is it just the narrow window is the better thing?
It's both.
Okay. Like, is it like contribution toward our genetic information they have? Okay.
Not a.
Okay. I'm just curious.
I mean, I can make stuff up. Do you want me to make stuff up? Like, understanding. So, the first fossils of this animal were discovered in a drugstore, an apothecary, essentially. Is that not really cool?
That is really cool. And no idea where it was from. It was just like, here is a drugstore and there's some tea.
Well, like, it was in China, so it was like in a traditional Chinese medicine apothecary.
That's a hip tag. Got any dragon teeth in here?
I mean, apparently. Yeah, so he was rummaging around. He would routinely find interesting fossilized teeth by doing this. And that was the first evidence they found for giant apes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. How did they know? Do we know how he... Like, I'm sure that there was some, but it's just the teeth just look very, very different.
Yeah, they're just like primate teeth. They're just apparently like super classic primate teeth. They're just massive.
Big. Okay.
And what's really interesting is even to date, the only evidence that we have that this animal existed is a whole bunch of teeth, like thousands of teeth, and I believe 4 fragments of jawbone.
Is that we found?
That we have.
That's all?
We have a huge number of teeth, but we have no other like skeletal remains.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it is, but still.
Also, Dino Dave, welcome on in. How you doing, Dino Dave?
Smikes, what? Am I wrong on this? I was just reading this paper from Nature that said that. And then I also fact-checked it. Am I wrong? That's dinosaur level stuff. Listen, Smikes.
And are they able to speculate the size based on that tooth?
The tooth, like, maybe a little bit, but then the size of the jaw is pretty impressive. All right, let's do this.
Again, just like the different teeth.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have much else to go on, but I think it's partly like where they're found, like, so partly their range, and then also the time frame that they're found.
Gotcha. And then Ian asks, how are they only jaws? It seems kind of weird that their bones like aren't all together. Yeah, I guess that is it. Why do the other bones break down?
Well, I don't know. We don't know that they're breaking down. It's just
moved.
How many times has a complete T-Rex skeleton been found? 0. It's been found 0 times, right?
Yeah, but it's not just T-Rex teeth littered. Is it?
Balint is incensed that it's just teeth.
It's weird. Okay. This proves evidence of the tooth fairy. The Gigantopithecus tooth fairy. That's what we've found her nests.
The caves.
The
caves where they normally find the fragments.
Her captain. Aliens. Come with me. Aliens. They didn't floss, and they just lost their teeth all the time. But like, there's nothing else. They're throwing some teeth here and there. Blame porcupine, says Cliff. Uh-oh. Cliff Alster McLean. Hi, Queen Relish.
Commonly gnawed by porcupines. I don't know what to make of this. What journal was this published in?
AJPA, yearbook article. Yearbook of Physical Anthropology tonight, so we did that too. We've been doing good tonight. Lita, you are a geneticist. You're talking about 10 million year old teeth. Where's the DNA evidence?
It's not 10 million year old teeth. It's like 200, 300,000 year old teeth.
Oh, so there's DNA.
There could still be DNA in there. They just need to get their act together, figure out how to find it.
Thank you, Corn Relish. Thank you,
Mike,
Matt.
Here's the thing. I don't trust an anthropologist or whatever to be extracting DNA. If you trust... Look, it's not in their job description. It's not. They need to get a biochemist in. Get me a jersey. Send me in. I'll do it. I'll play for the team. That's not their job. I would be worried. I would be worried for them if they were doing it. So the subject of today, of this particular news story is there was a paper that came out in Nature that described the largest of the Gigantopithecus, and they shifted their extinction window to about 250,000 years ago to between 215 to so 215,000 years ago ballpark is when they went extinct, but possibly as far back as 250,000 years ago. So there's a more narrow window. Before, they thought that the last of the Gigantopithecus was 300,000 years ago, possibly older. So they've shifted the window, and one of the reasons that is actually important is because there was a lot of environmental changes going on during the time, and figuring out what actually caused their extinction is important. I mean, that's a big time frame shift, right? So that was one thing, and then they did a bunch of really cool imaging, and actually tried to look at the changes in the teeth over time. Like, they looked at 22 different caves where fossils of these animals have been found, and they were able to date the fossils themselves, and then do particular imaging to try to determine like what their diet was. And so they were able to see a shift in diet as you got closer to the extinction window. And it allowed them to make some really interesting comments about changes in behavior and food access. So they've been able to shift the extinction window and narrow it down quite a bit. And then they were also able to make some interesting inferences on like behavior and diet, and also how it changed leading up to their extinction. And I thought that collectively was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's also, I wanted to read you this comment because I thought this made me chuckle.
Okay.
MacMD says, curious Gigantopithecus didn't do so well with the focus group, so Curious George ended up winning the name of the children's book series. And then people were also wondering if we knew why they went extinct. And then Arg was wondering any particular reason why in caves.
So the in caves thing, I don't know. Probably partly it's a dwelling thing, and then also I think those fossils, like if that is where they are dwelling to begin with, their fossils are probably better preserved there than just scattered on ye old forest floor. And the reason they went extinct, PBS Eons actually kind of gets it right, even though this video is 6 years old. It's mostly habitat change. Not quite in the way that PBS Eons was suggesting it, but these guys were forest dwellers, it seems, based on their teeth evidence. And they had access to a lot of seasonal fruits and a pretty steady influx of water. This is all just based on imaging of their teeth, which I think is pretty cool. And over the extinction window, you can see other evidence, like other geological evidence suggesting that the ecosystem is changing from forest with a little bit of grassland to now being mostly grassland, arid, also with a fair bit of evidence of fires, like frequent fires. And so it changed access to their diet. All of a sudden, their diet wasn't seasonally varied. They say that the variety in their diet shrank a lot, and that you can tell by the growth of their teeth and the lead content of their teeth, like that their water intake had changed. So their diet and their water intake both changed as the habitat around them was changing. And also they say apparently like the way they were able to image the teeth, they showed that there was signs of sort of extended stress for the animal. That's something that I couldn't look up. I couldn't figure out how. I mean, they describe it in the paper, but I couldn't find other papers that explain in detail how that particular inference is made.
And Hibbs says it's neat. All we need is really one tooth to get a lot of this information.
Well, I wouldn't find it convincing if it was just one tooth. The reason that this is because, maybe it was just that one individual was injured and didn't have access to food and water or was under a lot of stress. What was interesting about this study is for the first time, they did a survey of the entire region of the Gigantopithecus blacki, and they surveyed and imaged 22 different cave sites.
Okay.
And so they were able to make comments, and so those spanned a huge time frame. And that's what helped them both narrow the window and also start making comments about generalizations of much earlier than the extinction window. This is what we were seeing across a bunch of different cave sites. And then as you approach the extinction window, these are the changes that are becoming typical, right? If it was only one or two individuals or only one or two teeth across this, I would not find that convincing at all.
Okay.
But they had rather a large amount of material. Given that we're only looking at teeth, they had a pretty good level of material that they were working with.
Nice. All right.
Yeah, there are lots of inferences, Smikes. That's true. Okay.
Now it says, or due to climate change, they migrated to a new area, and that area is now underwater, hence no fossils found.
Yeah, I think that you'd probably start to see a geographical shift, maybe, but it's not impossible. Like that's why the extinction window kind of keeps shifting, quite frankly, right? The more research we do. Oh, Maddie, the stress. So I have it pulled up. So the water intake and seasonal variations in food made sense, and I was able to find references about how they were able to make that determination based on the imaging that they were doing of the teeth. But they also made comments about prolonged stress, and they didn't specify exactly what prolonged. I mean, I know it's kind of a generic term, but I'm assuming that that is actually specific terminology to their field. And I couldn't figure out I just couldn't find any papers that explained how they were able to read the imaging of the teeth to determine acute versus general and prolonged stress. I mean, they made comments about the banding, but anyway, all right. This is probably not helpful for most people, but anyway.
All right, let's go.
Okay.
On the science news story doing?
Yeah, so chat, there is a new paper out in Nature that took a more comprehensive look at Gigantopithecus. In fact, the largest of the Gigantopithecus. So Gigantopithecus blacki, which is a truly impressively sized giant ape that was at least 10 feet tall. According to the very scant fossil evidence that we have, which shockingly is mostly just teeth and a few jawbones. Yeah, Rister, they got huge. They got very impressively sized. And what's incredible to me is that they have they have thousands and thousands of teeth recovered and no other bones beyond a few, like, jaw bones. Yeah. Risto! Yeah. Have you been internet stalking Gigantopithecus? Because yes, you are exactly on point. Anyway, so this paper did a more comprehensive survey of this particular Gigantopithecus. And it was doing this for a couple of reasons. One was it wanted to see if they could make inferences about their behavior and lifestyle if they looked at enough of the teeth. And also they wanted to see if they could shift the extinction window. So it had a pretty large window, like extinction window, but most scientists accepted the fact that they were extinct by 300,000 years ago. This paper moves it up a bit. They're saying 215. Yeah, they moved the extinction window, and they think that based on the evidence that they've been able to present, that the reason for their extinction has to do with habitat change. They think that this particular giant ape was specialized on a certain kind of forest, and they demonstrate that as you approach the extinction window, you can see that their diet changed and their diet became less varied, as did their access to water, which is interesting because this is all through imaging of their teeth that they were able to determine this. And Smikes is probably getting very angry right now because he doesn't find any of this convincing. But one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, aside from the fact that I think people just get excited about this kind of like charismatic megafauna, is I think it's really interesting the different ways that they're able to do dating of fossils. And I thought it'd be a really just short, like, you guys have the highlights of the story, but I thought we could just do a short little sidestep into this, because I think there's some technologies that like just don't, we all hear about radiocarbon dating, right? So we're gonna watch a really short video on that. You said, can't things move around in the strata? Does that matter? Yeah, it absolutely does. And that's one of the reasons I do like-ish this study, as far as this kind of study goes. They looked at so many, they looked at more sites than I would say most people in their field would consider reasonable. So they looked at 22 different cave sites and did at least 6 different measurements, both on, so some on the fossils themselves and then some on the surrounding material, and they tried to get a consensus for that site, and then they compared how that measured to all of the other 22 different cave sites. So Smikes, what do you think? Do you forgive me? This is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this article, because I thought this was so cool, and I feel like we haven't really spoken about it before. Smikes is probably still mad at me for bringing this up. But okay, all right. So I'm going to give voice to the voiceless Smikes here because he's been so quiet and reserved about his skepticism. Do you guys find it convincing that we've described an entire species based on teeth? Admittedly, several thousand teeth and a couple of jawbones. Smikes, no, you don't forgive me? Okay. Well, there we have it. I mean, do you guys find it convincing? Because I will say, we've all, if you look at like the news articles or any, you know, nobody's sitting around debating whether or not
This is true.
Gigantopithecus blacki is a species. Everyone's just accepted that that is the case.
Cliff was wondering, if the dating depends on the light falling on the quartz before the burial, then how can the method work in cave sediments where it's dark?
Sorry, repeat the question one more time.
It's right here if you want to read it.
Okay. Dating depends on light falling on the quartz before the burial, then how can the method work in the cave sediment where it's dark? Well, I think for the fossils in particular, the idea is that those would be sort of like near time of death. And some of the sediment dating, we would have to like go back and look at their rationale, but I think the sediment dating had also to do with like the pollen and other things that were being brought in on the same layer. That's my understanding. Smikes, you don't find it convincing. Yeah, I accept that you don't find it convincing, but chat, does the rest of chat find it convincing that based on teeth alone, we can declare that we have a new species?
Captain says, I think it's a good start, but we need to find more bones. I'll defend the paleontologists, but they can only work with the materials they find. Paleontology and geology involves a lot of assumptions and arm waving. Unfortunately, we don't have time machines.
Ooh, well said.
Maddie says it depends on the teeth and the field.
Okay. Balint, what about you? Do you think Gigantopithecus is real?
Big Amy says, I find the opposite of whatever Smikes finds. That seems to make Lita happy. And then Cliff says, I think the most small mammal paleontology depends on teeth. I think that sounds familiar too, Cliff. I think Danny's told us that as well. I think with all the methods that you're showing, like, I buy it. I'm still confused as to why, like, I get sometimes the teeth just preserve better, but, like, it's still just weird to me. That's the only thing that's found. But I can make the inference of the size that we can get from it, the environment that it lives in, the things that it could eat, and then the way they're dating these strata in multiple ways.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's what gets it for me. Like, if it was just this by itself, maybe not as much, but, like, it's the multiple things, and they're showing the similarities, and it's coming to the same answer.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that the paper was well done. Again, sort of in the limitations of what they had to work with, I thought they did a really thorough job. And then, so yeah, it'd be really nice to see more bones, and I know that's sort of what you said. So yes, I would absolutely love to see more bones. And I'll quibble a little bit about, can we really... Like, it's fine to imagine what this animal looks like. I think I'd want to be careful in how we depict it, keeping in mind, like, its actual physical characteristics. Yeah, we can make inferences about its diet, etc., but I'd maybe want to be a little careful about some of the ways it's being depicted, like, really how much about its physical characteristics do we know, given that we only have recovery of its, like, teeth and jaw. But that being said, I'm comfortable-ish saying that right now the evidence points to it being its own species. If teeth preserve quite well, and we have no other animal that could possibly possess this set of teeth and associated jaw, what conclusion are we to draw if not that it is another species? That was a long-winded way of saying, like, what is my alternative? And I'm much more open to an argument of maybe, like, how are we deciding that the different Gigantopithecus, like, there are 3 described Gigantopithecus, like great giant apes. I'm much more open to the idea that is there some fuzziness there because we have very little recovered material. But to say that there is no such thing as a Gigantopithecus, I would say, well, then what are we looking at?
Are you claiming Occam's razors as spikes?
Are you going to say you know better? Then Occam's razor is gold for a reason.
And let's see, there's a couple of other comments here. Hi, Kennedy, by the way. We just have to start somewhere, says Ian. And if that is just with jaws and teeth, then so be it. To which Rose says as well, I kind of agree here. It kind of leads to something. The thing is, you can't base the whole thing on teeth alone. What we can do. Mm-hmm. I still would love to find more.
Sure, I agree. And I think it's reasonable to say we really need to be clear about what assumptions are being made. You know, the way people talk about it in the media, it's like there's this giant ape and this is what it looked like, and it's like, hang on. We were speculating on maybe what it looked like based on its relatives. Like, I think that's an important aspect.
Yeah, Ian was just mentioning that, like, it's silly almost, like they're all depicted as large orangutans.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just based on the phylogenetics, right? Based on it, where Wesley. It's found. Shut up, Wesley, indeed.
Zombies.
You know, but yeah, I think it's reasonable, like, to be a little skeptical, and I'm much more open to the idea that are there really 3 distinct Gigantopithecus species? We don't have a whole lot of fossil record, so, you know, I'm not really coming down one way or another on that, but we certainly have some very impressive ape-like teeth that don't belong to anybody. If not Gigantopithecus, then we've yet to find the animal that they do belong to. So.
By the way, Tommy says he loves hearing you say, shut up, Wesley. Thank you all for the follows. Welcome in. Captain Willow says, I wonder if they can use oxygen isotopes on the teeth to tell something about the latitude and temperatures that primates may have lived in, especially how that changed through time, if is that consistent with other hypotheses.
Interesting. I'm not familiar with that form of dating, but that's interesting. They didn't do that in the study. They did a lot of very exhaustive techniques. That was not one that I saw, though.
That would be kind of cool, right? To figure out if there's additional data that they can get that way.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe we're all trying to look at this paper with more want.
Yeah, we all want more,
right?
And I think that's fair, because it's cool. The idea of a giant 10-foot ape-like creature, I think, is kind of engaging. It engages the imagination, if nothing else. And that's fantastic as far as, like, getting people pumped up about science. I love it. Evolution is crazy and weird. Evolution leads to some bonkers stuff, y'all. Like, a 10-foot ape is one of the tamest things that evolution has come up with, if we're surveying all of life, right? So I think that that's great if it's getting people excited. I just think we would all love to see more, and I think maybe being a little more transparent about what information we actually have would be helpful. But I do think the techniques they used for dating were really quite cool.
That is cool.